Welcome to Leveraging Success, where faith, business, and legacy meet. I'm Jeff Gerhardt. This is episode 3 of the Thriving Partnership series, and today we're going after the conversation entrepreneurial couples avoid most: money. Not the kids, not the calendar, not even the business. Money. I'll walk you through 3 separate conversations every couple needs to have: visions, operations, and risk. Plus, I've got some instructions for your bedroom. Let's get into it. Recently, Heather and I went on a date, and we go on a date on a regular basis. Normally, Wednesday night is our date night. And so we were sitting there talking about the past because we are just getting on 10 years since we jumped out together and started our business. And so when we jumped out of our corporate life to capitalize this crazy idea that we could start a consultancy, that we would be able to get things moving while we pursued our calling. We were sitting there together and talking, wow, we've been going at this for 10 years. And I remember there were this times of early entrepreneurial days, we were told over and over again, okay, just hang on to year one. And then we get to year one and I just say, hang on to year three. I am telling you, I had so many people then would say to me, oh, well, you just need to get to year five. And then and the last time I heard a milestone was year 7. We're past year 7. I don't know if it's supposed to feel any different, I guess, but I guess I'm also acclimated to the time and sort of level that we've gotten to, but it doesn't get any more comfortable, I'm sorry to say. It's not as if it's so, like, rock solid that it's not fragile, couldn't go away quickly, the market couldn't change, twist. We are still reliant on God. And so there's no pretending that that's not going on, and I'm fine with that. Well, I'm fine with that now. I don't think that I was super fine with it early on. I was just thinking, "Hey, God, A plus B equals that you're gonna provide, and it's gonna go so well, and boom." But there wasn't always that. There was these challenging moments where we're thinking to ourselves, "Did we make a huge mistake? Did we not hear God?" And years of taxes, man, talk about having gratitude and shock at the same time. We were looking at that going, how how did how did that work? Like, there's no sense of it, that we couldn't really even fully understand it except God, except that He provided. And that's the way that it goes. And this is why I think entrepreneurship is just a beautiful thing for a believer, because there's some part of it that A, you don't have control over, B, as you've got a payroll, bills, choices, what are you going to do to keep the thing afloat? How are you going to continue to build that business? You're reliant more than ever on God. And again, I wouldn't change a thing. Although, I'm sure that all of us could go back a decade and say things to our former self that would scare the lights out of us, maybe keep us from going forward as entrepreneurs. Today, we are in the 3rd episode of a 5-part series. This is the Thriving Partnership series. Today, we're talking about the money conversation that you keep avoiding, because there's financial alignment in marriage that's so important, and it's before it's even a business issue. Today, I want to talk to you about that because the promise of achieving a marriage often involves, no, I don't want to say often, always involves some agreements around finances. So I'm going to be thinking this through with you. I want to give you some prompts today. They're going to allow you to have a conversation with your spouse, with yourself, with God. And as you work through those prompts, you will be moving forward in a way with which I think there's a chance for more strength, because you'll create more commitment to a vision and being aligned to that vision together in your business and your marriage and finances. Because being an entrepreneur is not easy, but there's one conversation that entrepreneurial couples avoid more consistently than any other. And it's not the kids, it's not the calendar, although both challenges are there. It's not even really about the business, it's about money. And more specifically, it's about what money means because when you ask two people what financial success looks like, and one of them builds business for a living, you're often going to get two very different answers. Your spouse wants to know, when is it going to feel like enough? You're already thinking about how to deploy the next dollar. Your spouse wants to build a cushion. You're looking at the same cushion as dead capital. Your spouse wants a vacation. You're running numbers on what that quarter's reinvestment could compound into. These are things that are real things. And there's no formula. All of us want to have a spreadsheet, right? Hey, make my life into a spreadsheet to where I can just plug in a few numbers and da 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 da. At the bottom, I can get the answers to what I should do next. Um, but I mean, the opportunities for holding on to money, spending money, cushions, capital use, you know, those instincts and needs aren't wrong. It's just if you've never worked through a vision by sitting down and having a conversation of what does the end game actually look like? In my coaching practice, we say you can't hold anyone accountable until you know their vision. But once you know their vision, you can hold them accountable to that vision. Well, the problem is if we've never discussed the vision, we can create argument, not conversation, because we don't know what the end game looks like or what we're really trying to go to. And so with no ability to see the end, even in the shorter term, when I say short term, like just a year out, then what are we working for? And then really what's going on is just competing agendas without vision. This is why Proverbs 29:18 is so important in what we do in the master's program and what we talk about here in leveraging success. Having a thriving partnership involves vision. Not having vision is the way to destruction. So I want to go into this money conversation with you again with some prompts that you may take the question down for yourself and then journal answer. Maybe you and Holy Spirit are going to have a conversation. And as you do, you journal out these questions, ask, ask the Father, what do you think about this? And Jesus, how do I honor you most with the way that I see this? Let's start here. Let's figure this out. Why is money so much harder for entrepreneurial couples than it is for couples where both spouses have a traditional employment income, or even just one spouse? One or both have something that seems traditional. Now, first of all, what we know in entrepreneurial life is there's peaks and there's valleys. And the thing that I believed in my corporate days was that it was just best to have a steady state because then I wasn't risking anything, but that's just not true. That is just not true. It doesn't matter how big the company is, you're a number, you could be chopped off the company from one day to the next. So yes, I pretended that that steady state income plus bonuses and options and stuff was creating some sort of stability. Uh, but, that was just a different set of risks. But in an entrepreneurial life with the variable income, it creates just a baseline of anxiety for the spouse who might not be the entrepreneur. Now, I can even go a little bit further with this because even if your spouse is in the entrepreneurial venture with you, if they're not aware of the vision or the current reality in your finances, it can be just as bad, it can be just as big of a gulf of understanding and distance between the two of you on this subject. So you can't plan around a number that is changing every month or is sort of like an uncertainty. Now, let's think about it like this. Entrepreneurs are trained to see risk as an opportunity. but many spouses may not be wired the same way when they think about risk. They might see it as a threat. And both are reading the same balance sheet at some level, sort of perceiving a balance sheet or knowing a balance sheet. So that comes to a big question like, hey, you're busting it for this thing that we're doing. When do we get to enjoy this? That's a big question. And one or both of you may be thinking delayed gratification. Let's hold on. It's our superpower. But one may be saying, hey, I'm over here starving, waiting to spend money. We've been waiting to do A, B, and C for so long. And it becomes this sort of infinite deferral. So that creates a lot of tension. It puts us in a place where we've got to be able to talk about this. Now, we also think about business spending versus personal spending, and that can get a little blurry, right? Is that business credit card and whether profit actually means anything, if it goes straight back into the company or swipe the card. I had a client whose wife used to say, his job for me is just to make sure I can go like this. I'm swiping a credit card with my hand in the air. I can go like this over and over again and never have it stop. You know, maybe one of you is a spender, one of you is a saver. What I'm saying though is that as we watch what we're spending in the business, what we're spending on family, when we're going to get to spend on ourselves, it's just often it comes down to this. There's an information gap. One spouse knows far more, far more about the reality of finances than the other, which creates a quiet power imbalance and a lot of unspoken anxiety. Potentially, right? Let me be transparent with you about Heather and I. I know a lot more about our financial position than Heather does. She's not completely in the dark and all of that, but I'm closer to it, and so I know it. I'll say this about Heather: she's amazing at trusting me to say stay or go. Now, that doesn't mean we can't get to some discussions around this kind of topic, but there's a large amount of trust. And when you continue to deliver, you quarterback well, the one who's closest to the money creates trust. And so trust is something to be so careful with. But most money arguments in these entrepreneurial marriages, they're really not about money. They're more about safety, control, comfort, trust, and probably being heard. So the couple that can name what's underneath the argument is the couple that actually can resolve it. Think about it like this. We're not arguing about the vacation budget. We're arguing about whether I'm being considered here. So I'm putting some things into play because I'm sure you're identifying with part or maybe all of the equation that we're looking at here. We have to go a little bit deeper into understanding the three money conversations that you need to have. Now, these three money conversations are going to help you to have the prompts over a date night. And I want to encourage you to maybe think about the questions I'm going to give you, that you might write them down. You might make them your own so that you could have this conversation. But it's really going to help you to understand because most couples are having the wrong money conversation or even no conversation at all. There are actually three distinct conversations you need to have. And the secret is keeping them separate. Okay. Here they are. They're vision conversation, operations conversation, and a risk conversation. Now, you may title these differently, but they're categories: vision, operations, and risk. Now, in the first category of vision, it's really a question of where are we going? Well, let me suggest that in the vision, you have a vision for your outcomes before your money, and that you stretch beyond your realm of possibility into a place with which faith is engaged, right? So we're going to talk about risk in a moment, but you need a big vision where if God doesn't show up, it's not going to matter. It's not going to happen. So we're building a vision around that and getting into the financial discussions of vision. So here's some questions for you that you might write down. One is, what does financial freedom look like for our family? Now, drawing the line on consumption is the best thing you can do. It's the best sort of thing that you can do to create a cut line and say, this is as much as we're going to spend. Cost of living adjustments, sure, but this is our cut line, and everything above it has real potential to be invested in good places. I've got a good friend, Cody Hobelman, that has a podcast called the Finish Line Podcast. I highly recommend it. In fact, we're going to put it in the show notes. I'd love for you to know Cody in this podcast. He interviews some great people, including some master's program people in his podcast. But he talks a lot about that is, what does financial freedom look like? So what does that look like? Number two, what's the number or the lifestyle we're actually building toward? Does it include the extravagant car, the second house, a big vacation, college for our kids? I'm going to make another recommendation because it just came to me. Uh, there's a book that you should read called Inheritology. And Inheritology is a great book by my friend Jim. All of a sudden, I'm having a spacing on Jim's name, but Jim is a former Ron Blue partner. I've been a part of Kingdom Advisors for a number of years. He speaks there all the time. And I'm quickly looking this up because I want to be able to tell you his name. He's a special guy. And if you ever get a chance to hear him speak, the one time I heard him speak, he got to speak for 30 minutes, and I wish he would have spoken for 2 hours. It was just that good. Jim Wise. Jim Wise. Just looked it up here. Jim Wise, Inheritology. It's just another good book for you to use to consider what your outcomes are gonna be, long term together. All right, some more questions for you. What legacy do we want to build with what God has given us? What legacy? Now, when we think about legacy, it's not about buildings with your names on it. I mean, it's fine, but really what we're talking about is what will echo into eternity, what will break through. So what do we want said about us in eternity? How do we want to show up in God's story? Another question. Do we agree on the timeline? Okay, so vision is all fine, but when? By when? Okay, well, getting that all nailed down is the first part, vision. This is the vision conversation. Now, second conversation, operations. And in operations, we're really trying to understand, how do we run the household? Who's going to pay the bills and track the budget? You would be surprised. In some households, nobody knows who's doing that. Or we even outsourcing that, or someone helping us with that. So who's going to do that? And how about this? What's the no questions asked spending threshold for each of us? Where's the line? Operations conversation. What purchases trigger a joint conversation? Maybe a level, maybe a type of purchase that you want to have. Oh, hey, we need to have a team powwow before we make that choice. And then how do we handle unexpected expenses? Where are we going to go with that? How are we going to fund it? Operations. How do we run this household? Third category is risk. You know what we say around here? Faith is spelled RISK. So this is really in the faith space, and it's what we're going to believe together. And the question subtitle here is, what can we handle together? Now, there's a certain amount of risks that feel burdened onto one or either partner. But when we have this conversation, It allows for us both to share the burden of the risk and to be in prayer for it so that we have an opportunity to see that risk managed and supported. So, one question you can be asking is, what level of business risk are we both genuinely okay with? What amount is that? Because business risk involves everything from leverage to being after it when it comes to how many things we're going to take under our potentially get credit for, loan for. Are we going to do that at all? How's it going to work? Then what's the household floor we protect no matter what? I like to call this the oxygen mask. What's our mask level? Hey, base level of income needs to be X for us to be able to keep it together. When we're below X, red lights go off. Another risk question: how do we decide when the business needs capital the household could be using? Hmm, good question. That one might be deep. You might have to break that down into smaller chunks around the business strategy, the future needs of the household, etc. You know, I tell you this, when it comes to houses, you can basically just put it on a 20-year time frame. If you're buying a house that's been built 18 years ago, you have 2 more years before everything's going to fall apart. And after 20 years, at least every 10 to 20, you're going to have big maintenance issues. It just degrades. First 20 years are pretty much gold, and after that, every 10 to 15, you're gonna have everything cycle. So what do you need to predict? If you predict some of that in your household, you might be able to predict some of that in your business based on your strategy. What can we place into time frame and be ready for? Now look, all plans, they mean everything and they mean nothing at the same time, right? We make the plan so we can get on the same page with trust, and then we know that we're gonna have to make adjustments as the game goes by because, whoops, nobody planned for that tire to blow, and when that happens, you roll with that. Last question in the risk category: what happens if this doesn't work? Now, I want to suggest you have this conversation right away. What happens if what we're doing doesn't work? These are the fallback points. Um, what are you willing to do? Are you carrying a pocket offer to go to work for somebody? Or are you building side revenue streams, mailbox money, uh, the needs with which to maintain well? Now, look, I want you to understand these are three different conversations. And many, I should say, couples can collapse these three into one conversation. And then that conversation goes sideways fast. It's like we're talking about the future, we're talking about the present, we're talking about tomorrow, we're talking about when we're retiring, and all of these things. And all of that can create all sorts of bunny trails. And wait a second, I thought we were, and you get worn out. So don't try to eat this all at once. Keep them separate. Vision specifically can get derailed by operations because vision will lead to a quick, we can't afford that. And that's normal, right? It happens in your business. We'll do that here. Keep the vision and the operational details separate because operational conversations get derailed by risk anxiety. And that's the other thing about mixing those together. What if the business has a bad quarter? Then what? And similarly, risk conversations are going to get derailed by vision disagreements. I thought we agreed on where we were going. So you've got to keep these separate occasions, one date night, one vacation discussion, maybe, one, evening before we go to bed, but get them clear so that each of them having some answers, you can put the whole puzzle together. You know, Heather and I have had many of these kind of conversations over the years. Um, it seems to me that I enjoy most talking about vision financially at the end of the year. That sweet spot time between Christmas and New Year's when I'm gathering some receipts. I'm seeing, sort of final numbers or what are going to be final numbers soon. And I can kind of see this is the way the year is going to end up. And so I love just sitting down when we've got some of that extra family time. It's just us sitting around and I can get out a few spreadsheets and say, hey, this is where we're going to end. Here's where I think we're going to be. If God provides, this could be this way and that way. And that allows for a vision discussion to be there. It's referenceable. Hey, honey, remember when we said back at Christmas that, then we have that referenceable anchor through the rest of the year. All right. Now, I want to talk to you about another pinch point for entrepreneurial couples, and that's around business wealth versus household wealth. Business versus household. Because one of the most dangerous financial patterns in entrepreneurial marriages is treating business wealth and household wealth like it's the same conversation, and they are not. And conflating them creates problems for both. So business equity is not liquid household wealth. It shouldn't feel like money you have until you actually have it. Now, any lawyer, CPA, or the tax people will tell you that you should be treating it that way anyway. So we have to be careful, and this is where we really do have to wear hats of care and stewarding. I'm stewarding my business. I'm stewarding my family so that those 2 things don't actually weigh each other down because one could be in trouble and unnecessarily hurt the other one just when one or the other was getting moving. So you got to understand that the household floor, the most important number you're probably not tracking, the household floor on what you need to have as income is a non-negotiable amount that the household needs, completely separate from business performance. So this oxygen mask, if I can know the oxygen mask that you need to have, then it's a number that's going to cover the mortgage, the groceries, the tuition, the minimum life you're committed to. And that just allows for you to get to that floor and say, we got to that. Now, what else happens is a matter of prayer, discussion, and the strategy that we've put together. I'll tell you, when we first moved to Texas, the week we arrived, having launched our business just some months before, in pursuit of our calling, I gave Heather $500 cash, $500 cash, and told her that's what she had for groceries. She looked at me like I was crazy. She would have normally expected 4 to 5 times that. She took it well, but I realized in that moment I had not been preparing her for what I really already knew, that we were gonna be going through a tight transition. We were launching out. We just started our business some months back. We moved across the country. We had to get through all that transition while we were building our calling life. And she told me, "I don't know how I can make that work." And yeah, it was a reality check for me, and it really understands this. Is that leadership provides clarity around the picture, plan, and part that we play through change. Now, if you have any sort of transition coming up, uh, men specifically, be creating a picture with your spouse, be casting vision for where you're going, and then be building the plan and discussing their part and my part and maybe the rest of the family's part of what it's going to take to go through that change. A prompt. A prompt for all of us is, what's the next clear conversation we need to have about finances? So what is it? Think for a moment, stop for a second. What's the next clear conversation we need to have about finances? Now, this household financial agreement, this oxygen mask, I want to suggest to you that you need to understand what it would look like to actually create a household financial agreement with your spouse. Not a budget spreadsheet, but just a framework of how to make money decisions together that works as a team with clarity and trust. I think there are 6 elements to this. There's the oxygen mask. What's the non-negotiable household floor that the household needs? 1, what is it? 2, the discretionary threshold, what each spouse can spend individually without any discussion. Agree on a number there together. Discretionary threshold. Number 3, joint decision triggers. All right, so discuss the dollar amount or category where we say we need to get committed together on this before we go forward. What is the joint decision trigger? Fourth one is the wealth chair designation. Who's going to lead the household financial operations day to day? Bills, budget, tracking. By the way, we've come to really enjoy Monarch. I use Monarch. Someone is on our show recently, Stephen Nooner, pointed me to Monarch. I'll put a link to Monarch in my show notes. But that opportunity helped us because it helped us to be able to see things at the same time and see transactions as they come through and be aware. How about this? The business to home interface. This one is number 5, business to home interface. So, how and when business financial decisions get discussed at home and who initiates. Now, here's what I'm suggesting to you: create a cadence, a location, and a decision for how and when we're going to have that discussion. Because when we get afraid, we can easily jab, jab, jab with that knife of fear, worried about some sort of issue that's going on in a financial issue. So, when do you want to have that discussion? Set it up. Create an understanding of the engagement rules of we're going to have a business meeting this often. We're going to do it at home. We're not going to do it at home. How are you going to do it so you create a safe place with which to have it? Let me make this important recommendation. Do not have financial discussions in the bedroom. May I offer to you, do not have any arguments in the bedroom. This was given to me a number of years ago. And what you're doing is making sure that that space, that container of your bedroom is not a place of anything but the love parlor, the place where we go for retreat, the place where we are alone, dressing, getting ready, talking in love. Protect that space. Do not do financial, do not do arguments in that space, but then create the rules of engagement, because just saying you're not going to do it there, you got to have a place where you are going to do it. So, when you go there, this is the business of what we do here. Finally, last but not least, have an annual vision review. Now, I explained this earlier with my idea, the way I do that between Christmas and New Year's. Find the spot to separate out. This is not day to day operations and bill pay. This is a dedicated conversation to what did we have come in? How much did we give to the kingdom this year? What do we want to propose should be given to the kingdom next year? Are there things in our line of income, discretionary thresholds, oxygen mask numbers that need adjustment? Now, the beauty of this, while it's not a legal document, it creates an agreement together, a covenant conversation that you don't need a spreadsheet for. These are just beautiful rules of engagement for leadership that doesn't take well, what was this line on December the 30th at 10 p.m.? I saw this charge. Who made it? That's the kind of like nitpicky, in the weeds stuff that gets lost and then it burns you out. You know, when we work together, we create rules of engagement, we have general guidelines, and then we release with trust. Is it possible that we will break trust or make a mistake? Yes. But we can come back to those things because we've got a vision and we can hold each other accountable to a vision. And we've got a mode of operation with which we said, this is the way that we're going to do it. And when we do that and keep the good hygiene of it, amazing things can happen. Because look, what we're playing for is to make sure that our dollars don't end up dead, but they get converted into a currency that will last forever and ever. Okay, so here's what I want you to take away from this one. This money conversation you may have been avoiding is not dangerous like you think. What's dangerous is continuing to not have it. Because when money stays a silent undercurrent in a marriage, the enemy's going to use it. He's going to find the right moment and bam, it's going to hit. And walls get created, they get harder, and they become difficult to overcome. So have the vision conversation, have the operations conversation, have the risk conversation, not all at once, but have them. And you'll find you're on the same team. You'll work to get onto the same the same page. Look, next time, in the next solo episode for I'm gonna be honest with you, it's one of the ones I've been building towards since the beginning of this Thriving Partnership series. We're gonna talk about what happens when the business starts costing the marriage. The warning signs, the signs, the slow fade that most leaders don't see coming, and the protection systems that actually work. Stay with us, it's gonna be fun. I'm Jeff Gerhardt. This is Leveraging Success, and I'll see you next time. That's a wrap on episode 3. The money conversation you've been avoiding isn't dangerous. Avoiding it is. Have the vision conversation, the operations conversation, the risk conversation, just not all at once. Pick one this week, take it to date night, and before we go, let me pray for you. Father, there are many things that we trust you for, and provision is one of them. But God, our space between what we're trusting you for and what we have, that's often in the invisible, often during the waiting game. And that can create strife. God, I pray for those who are listening here, for those who are considering how to have the money conversation, that they would, God, because they're protecting their hearts, they're protecting their marriages, and they're doing that to be on mission for you, to be close to you. We love you, Jesus. Thank you. In your name we pray. Amen. Hey, we'll see you next time when we'll talk on episode 4 to talk about the thing that could be taking your whole marriage apart, the business itself. See you next time. God bless.